You think you're strong. You know you're chosen. You've survived what most people couldn't. You've walked through fire and came out without the smell of smoke. But there's one battle you still haven't won. Lust. And the worst part? You're not even sure why it still has power over you. You pray. You fast. You discipline yourself. You silence your desires. But they don't stay quiet. Deep down, you're wondering, if I'm chosen, why do I still struggle with this? Here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. The more anointed you are, the more intense your temptations will be. Not because you're weak, but because you're powerful. Because the enemy doesn't waste his attacks on people without potential. Lust isn't just a physical issue. It's spiritual warfare. And for chosen ones, it disguises itself behind desire. But its mission is to distract, delay, and destroy your destiny. In this video, you'll uncover the 5 hidden reasons why the chosen secretly struggle with lust. Even when everything else in their life is under control, you'll learn how to recognize it, why it haunts you, and most importantly, how to take your power back. Let's begin. Emotional depth becomes emotional overload. Most people think lust is a physical craving, but for the chosen, lust often stems from something deeper, emotional intensity. You feel things others don't. Pain cuts deeper. Joy feels richer. Loneliness becomes unbearable, and desire, when it hits like a wave you can't stop. You weren't made to live on the surface. You're wired for depth, but that depth comes at a cost, because the same emotional current that fuels your compassion, your insight, and your spiritual gifts can also fuel temptation when it goes unregulated. Lust becomes a way to escape your own intensity, not because you're perverted, not because you're weak, but because your system is overloaded, and pleasure feels like the only off switch. And here's the twist. Most chosen ones don't lust after people. They lust after connection, after relief, after rest from the pressure of being on all the time. That's why the fight feels so spiritual, because what you crave isn't sex. It's to be seen, held, and known, without performance. So the lust isn't your real problem. It's the symptom of your sensitivity. And when you learn how to regulate your emotional energy, lust loses its grip. Suppressed desires don't die. They become shadows. Here's something few people talk about. When you grow up being told to be pure, holy, or perfect, you start to hide your natural desires. And over time, those desires don't go away. They just move into your shadow. Carl Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, it grows stronger." So now you've got all this desire, all this hunger, all this sexual energy, but it's locked away. In the basement of your psyche, you can't integrate it, you can't talk about it, you can't even admit it exists. So guess what happens? It comes out when you're tired. It comes out when you're stressed. It comes out when you're isolated. It comes out in your dreams, your fantasies, your scrolling habits, because you never brought it to light. You never gave it space to be acknowledged. So now it controls you from the shadows. Lust, in this case, isn't evil. It's repressed vitality. And until you bring your full self to the table, including your sexual self, you'll always battle against yourself. The way out isn't suppression. It's integration. When you stop shaming your desires and start listening to what they're trying to tell you, you reclaim the part of you that's been locked in silence for too long. Deep loneliness in a shallow world. There's a certain loneliness that only the chosen understand. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely unseen. You can have success, love, and respect, and still feel a quiet ache in your soul, because chosen ones walk a path few understand. You carry burdens most people don't even see. You feel a spiritual responsibility that weighs on you in private, and sometimes you just want to feel alive again. That's where lust creeps in. It doesn't come announcing itself with danger. It offers comfort. It says, "This will make you feel connected." Just for a moment, you won't feel alone. But it's a counterfeit. It gives you the sensation of intimacy, without the substance of connection. And after it's over, you feel emptier than before, because lust doesn't satisfy the soul. It just distracts it. If you've been running to lust in moments of loneliness, you're not evil. You're human. But you need to recognize this. You don't need to numb your loneliness. You need to start listening to it. It's pointing to your deeper need for authentic connection, not just physical touch. Lust is misunderstood. Creative power, here's the most overlooked truth. Lust is raw energy, and energy is neither good nor bad. It's all about how you direct it. Napoleon Hill called it sexual transmutation. It's the idea that your sexual energy is actually creative force. It can birth ideas, dreams, passion, visions, inventions, not just attraction. Chosen ones often have an immense reservoir of this energy. That's why lust hits so hard. You have more of it than most. The problem isn't that you're lustful, it's that your creative energy is unfocused, untransmuted, and leaking. It shows up as temptation because you haven't yet claimed its real purpose. But once you start using your gifts, once you pour yourself into creation, service, purpose, and vision, lust no longer becomes a threat, it becomes a signal. It tells you you're full of power, now aim it wisely. The enemy attacks the chosen with pleasure. Here's the hardest truth. The enemy rarely attacks you with obvious destruction. He uses pleasure, because pain wakes people up. But pleasure puts people to sleep. If the enemy knows you're chosen, he doesn't need to kill you. He just needs to distract you long enough that you miss your moment. And what better distraction than lust? It's addictive, it's accessible, and best of all, it looks harmless. But every moment you spend chasing pleasure, you're not walking in purpose. Every time you give in without awareness, your clarity fades, your fire dims, and your sense of divine assignment weakens. Lust is a time thief, a spiritual fog, a sweet poison that numbs your discernment. That's why it feels like a cycle, because it's designed to trap the chosen, not tempt the average. You're not struggling because you're sinful, you're struggling because you're strategically targeted, and the moment you realize that, the war changes. You stop being a victim of lust, and you start becoming a warrior of intention. Now you see it clearly. This battle was never really about lust. It was about power. It was about emotional energy. It was about your shadow. It was about creative force. It was about destiny. Lust is just the mask. The real war is, will you stay connected to your highest self, or will you keep trading it for temporary relief? You're not dirty. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're chosen. And that means you're going to have to fight battles most people never even face. But if you can learn to see lust for what it is, a messenger, not a master, a distraction, not your identity, you'll rise above it, you'll reclaim your strength, you'll walk in alignment, and you'll become who you were always meant to be, not by force, but by clarity. And that clarity is the end of your war.